How does the tech that runs our world really work? We break it down to its fundamental truths. This is First Principles.
You are lying on a narrow table. It is cold, and the sheet they gave you is thin. A technician places a heavy plastic cage over your head or your knee, smiling reassuringly behind a pane of thick glass. Then the table begins to slide. You move backward, deeper and deeper into the throat of a white plastic donut. The space is tight. If you are claustrophobic, your heart rate is already climbing. You are told to hold perfectly still. And then the noise begins. It is not a hum or a whir. It is a violent mechanical rhythmic banging, clack, 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 thump, thump, thump. It sounds like someone is taking a hammer to a steel drum right next to your ear. This can go on for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, sometimes an hour. It is an intimidating, industrial, and sometimes terrifying experience. But while you lie there, enduring the noise, something miraculous is happening. That machine is stripping you naked, layer by layer. It is seeing through your skull, through the dura mater, into the gray matter of your brain. It is tracing the delicate ligaments of your knee. It is spotting tumors the size of a pea deep within your liver. And it is doing all of this without a knife, without a camera, and unlike an X-ray or a CT scan, without a single particle of ionizing radiation passing through your cells. We assume this machine is taking a picture of us. That is the common shorthand. We say the doctor ordered pictures of your back. But that is not what is happening. A camera captures reflected light. An X-ray captures shadows cast by dense bone. But an MRI does not look at you. It listens to you. It is a device that forces your body to broadcast a radio signal, and then it creates a map from the echo. So, how does a giant magnet and a blast of radio waves turn a human being into a high-resolution 3D model? How do we take the chaotic, messy reality of biology and translate it into clear, crisp digital data? And what are those loud banging noises actually doing? Today, we are going to climb inside the tube. We are going to deconstruct the magnetic resonance imaging machine. We are going to find out how we learn to turn the water in our bodies into a choir, and how learning to conduct that choir changed medicine forever. I am your host, and this is First Principles. Let us start with the experience we all know, or at least the experience we have seen on medical dramas. The MRI is the gold standard of modern diagnostics. If you tear your ACL playing soccer, you get an MRI. If you have a persistent migraine that won't go away, you get an MRI. It is the machine we trust to tell us the truth about the soft, squishy parts of ourselves. X-rays are fantastic for broken bones, for the hard architecture of the skeleton. But for everything else, the muscles, the organs, the brain, X-rays are blunt instruments. They just show gray shadows. The MRI changed everything because it allowed us to see the difference between a healthy liver and a diseased one, or between white matter and gray matter in the brain, with exquisite contrast. It is so precise that functional MRIs can watch blood flow change in your brain as you think specific thoughts. It feels like science fiction. It feels effortless. You slide in, you slide out, and the doctor has a slice-by-slice view of your anatomy. But the reality of the machine is anything but effortless. It is a beast. If you have ever been in the room with an MRI scanner, even when it is not scanning, you might sense a strange heaviness in the air. That is because you are standing next to one of the most powerful magnets on the planet. This isn't a magnet like the one on your refrigerator. The magnet in a standard hospital MRI is typically 1.5 or 3 Tesla. To give you a sense of scale, the Earth's magnetic field, the force that moves a compass needle and guides migrating birds, is about 0.00005 Tesla. The MRI is tens of thousands of times stronger than the magnetic field of the entire planet. It is so strong that if you walked into the room with a keychain in your pocket, the keys would be ripped through the fabric of your pants and fly across the room into the bore of the machine. If you walked in with an oxygen tank, it would become a lethal projectile, turning into a missile moving at highway speeds. There are horror stories in hospital safety logs of floor buffers, wheelchairs, and hospital beds being sucked into the magnetic vortex. The magnet is a monster, and it is always awake. It creates a gravitational well of magnetism that never turns off, not even at night. So, why do we need a magnet that strong? And why do we need to put a human being inside it? To understand the answer, we have to look at what medicine was like before we had this window. Go back to the early 20th century. If a patient had a headache, confusion, or a seizure, the doctor had very few options. They could do a neurological exam, check reflexes, look into the eyes. But the brain itself was a black box locked inside a skull. If there was a tumor, they wouldn't know exactly where it was or how big it was until they opened the patient up. Surgery was often exploratory. Imagine the terror of that. We think there is something wrong, so we are going to cut into your brain to look around. X-rays were discovered in 1895, and they were a miracle for bones. But X-rays pass right through soft tissue. A brain tumor and normal brain tissue look almost the same to an X-ray. Later came the CT scan, which uses computer-processed X-rays to create slices. This was better, but it still relied on radiation, and the contrast in soft tissues was limited. We needed a way to differentiate between tissues that were chemically different but had similar densities. We needed a way to see the chemistry of the body. The breakthrough didn't come from doctors. It came from physicists. In the 1930s and 40s, scientists like Isidore Isaac Rabi, Felix Bloch, and Edward Purcell were studying the fundamental properties of atoms. They weren't thinking about cancer or torn ligaments. They were thinking about the nucleus of the atom. They discovered that certain atomic nuclei, when placed in a magnetic field, would absorb and remit radio waves at a specific frequency. They called this phenomenon nuclear magnetic resonance, or NMR. For decades, NMR was a tool for chemists. You would put a test tube of some unknown substance into a small machine, zap it with radio waves, and look at the graph it produced. The graph would tell you what kind of molecules were in the tube. It was spectroscopy. It was about identifying chemicals, not making pictures. But then, in the 1970s, a few visionaries began to wonder if this principle could be scaled up. Could you put a living thing inside the machine? Could you use NMR to distinguish a tumor from healthy tissue? There is a famous, somewhat contentious history here involving a man named Raymond Damadian, who was obsessed with the idea that cancer cells had different magnetic properties than normal cells. He actually built a machine called the Indomitable. It looked like something out of a Jules Verne novel, and in 1977 he produced the first MRI scan of a human chest. It took nearly 5 hours to generate one blurry image. Around the same time, another researcher named Paul Lauterbur figured out how to take those signals and turn them into a spatial map, effectively inventing the imaging part of MRI. A British physicist named Peter Mansfield figured out how to do it fast. Lauterbur and Mansfield eventually won the Nobel Prize. Damadian did not. But regardless of who gets the credit, the result was the same. They had found a way to see the invisible. So, let's open the black box. How does it work? How do we get from a blurry concept of magnetic resonance to a crisp image of your knee? To understand MRI, we have to start with the most basic ingredient of the human body: water. You are mostly water. Your brain is about 73% water. Your muscles are about 79% water. Even your bones have water in them. A water molecule, H2O, contains 2 hydrogen atoms, and the nucleus of a hydrogen atom is a single proton. This proton is the star of our show. You need to imagine this proton not just as a dot, but as a tiny spinning top. It is constantly spinning on its axis, and because it is a spinning electrical charge, it acts like a tiny magnet. It has a north pole and a south pole. It is a microscopic compass needle. Right now, as you are listening to this, the billions of trillions of hydrogen protons in your body are spinning, but they are pointing in every random direction. One points up, one points down, one left, one right. They are chaotic. Because they are all canceling each other out, your body doesn't have a net magnetic field. You aren't magnetic. Now imagine we take you and slide you into the MRI machine. You are now inside the bore, surrounded by that massive superconducting magnet. We call this main magnetic field B0. It is a strong, steady, uniform field running straight down the center of the tube, from your head to your toes. When you enter this field, something happens to those trillions of tiny protons. Just like compass needles snapping to point north, the protons in your body react to the field. But they don't all just point straight up. Quantum mechanics is a bit weirder than that. They align either parallel to the field, pointing up towards your head, or anti-parallel, pointing down towards your feet. Here is the trick. It takes slightly less energy to align with the field than against it. So, a few more protons will line up pointing up than pointing down. It is a tiny difference. For every million protons pointing down, maybe 1,000,007 point up. But because there are so many atoms in your body, that tiny excess adds up. Suddenly, you, the patient, have become magnetized. You have a net magnetic vector pointing along the length of your body. But wait, if we just magnetize you, nothing happens. A compass needle pointing north is boring. It just sits there. If we want to learn anything about the compass, we need to disturb it. We need to poke it and see what happens. This leads us to the second component of the machine and the source of the resonance in magnetic resonance imaging. We have the magnet. Now we need the radio. Inside the plastic donut, hidden behind the casing, are coils of wire called radio frequency coils or RF coils. These coils are designed to broadcast a pulse of radio waves into your body. But not just any radio wave. It has to be a very specific frequency. This is where the analogy of the spinning top becomes crucial. When a top is spinning in gravity, it doesn't just stand perfectly still. It wobbles. It draws a little circle with its handle. This wobble is called precession. The protons in your body, aligned by the big magnet, are also precessing. They are wobbling at a very specific speed. This speed depends on two things: the type of atom, hydrogen, and the strength of the magnetic field. This is known as the Larmor frequency. In a standard 1.5 Tesla MRI, hydrogen protons precess at about 64 megahertz. That means they are wobbling 64 million times per second. Now imagine you are pushing a child on a swing. If you push the swing at random times, nothing happens. The swing just jerks around. But if you push the swing at exactly the right moment, just as it starts to go back down, you add energy to the system. The swing goes higher. This is resonance. You have to match the frequency of the push to the frequency of the swing. The MRI machine does exactly this. It fires a pulse of radio waves into your body at exactly 64 megahertz. It matches the wobble of the protons perfectly. Because the frequency matches, the protons absorb the energy from the radio wave. This energy absorption does two things. First, it takes some of those protons pointing up and flips them to point down. Second, and more importantly for our visualization, it forces all those wobbling protons to wobble in sync. Before the pulse, they were all wobbling at different points in their circle, uncoupled. After the pulse, they are all marching in lockstep. The result of this energy transfer is that the net magnetization of your body tilts. Instead of pointing straight up towards your head, the magnetic vector tips over 90 degrees. Now, the magnetic signal of the water in your body is spinning around in the transverse plane. Imagine a hula hoop spinning around your waist. This spinning magnetic field is what we need, because, as Michael Faraday taught us in the 1800s, a moving magnetic field creates an electric current. As this magnetic vector spins around inside you, it induces a tiny electrical voltage in the receiving coils of the MRI machine. That is the signal. That is the voice of the protons. We have poked the compass, and now it is shouting back at us. But the signal doesn't last. This brings us to the next phase, relaxation. This is where the biology comes in. This is how we tell the difference between a tumor and a liver. As soon as we turn off the radio pulse, the protons want to go back to normal. They want to release that extra energy they absorbed and go back to pointing north, aligned with the big magnet. This process is called relaxation. And here is the key. Protons in different types of tissue relax at different speeds. Think of it like a dinner party where you have just made a toast. Everyone raises their glass. That's the excitation pulse. Now, how long does it take for people to put their glasses down and return to normal conversation? It depends on the group. A group of rowdy friends might take a long time to settle down. A formal business meeting might settle down instantly. In your body, the environment is the type of tissue. Hydrogen protons in fat recover their alignment very quickly. Hydrogen protons in water, like in your spinal fluid, recover slowly. Protons in a solid tumor might have a different timing than the healthy tissue surrounding it. The MRI machine listens to this fading signal. It measures two things: how fast the magnetization returns to the vertical direction. We call this T1 relaxation, and how fast the protons fall out of sync with each other. We call this T2 relaxation. By tweaking the timing of the radio pulses and the listening periods, the radiologist can choose to highlight the fat, or the water, or the contrast between them. They can make the fluid in a cyst glow bright white, while the surrounding muscle looks dark. They are literally tuning the machine to listen to the chemistry of your cells. So, we have a magnet that aligns the protons. We have a radio wave that tips them over, and we have a listening device that hears them as they stand back up. We know what kind of tissue is there based on how fast it stands up. But wait, there is a massive hole in this explanation. If I just do what I described, I would get a signal that tells me, hey, there is some water and some fat in this machine. But I wouldn't know where it is. I would get a single jumbled signal from your entire body all at once. It would be like taking a photo where every pixel is piled on top of each other. I would know you have a liver, but I couldn't produce a picture of it. How do we create the image? How do we know that this specific burst of radio waves came from a spot 2 inches behind your left ear, and that burst came from the tip of your nose? This brings us to part E, the unseen giant. The true genius of the MRI lies in something called gradients. Remember those loud noises, the clack clack clack? That is the sound of the gradient coils turning on and off, and they are the secret to spatial encoding. Inside the main magnet, there are three smaller sets of electromagnets. These are the gradient coils. When they are turned on, they distort the main magnetic field in a very predictable way. They make the magnetic field slightly stronger on one side of your body and slightly weaker on the other. Why does this matter? Remember the Larmor frequency. The speed at which the protons wobble depends on the strength of the magnetic field. If the field is stronger, they wobble faster. If the field is weaker, they wobble slower. Let's use an analogy. Imagine a choir. If everyone in the choir sings the exact same note at the exact same volume, and you close your eyes, you can't tell who is standing where. It's just a wall of sound. But now, imagine the conductor gives a new instruction. He tells the choir members on the far left to sing a very low pitch. He tells the people in the middle to sing a medium pitch. And he tells the people on the far right to sing a very high pitch. This is a gradient of pitch. Now, if you close your eyes and you hear a high note, you know instantly that it is coming from the right side of the room. If you hear a low note, you know it is coming from the left. You have encoded physical space into frequency. This is exactly what the MRI does. By turning on the gradient coils, the machine changes the magnetic field so that protons in your head are spinning at a slightly different speed than protons in your feet. When the machine sends out the radio pulse, it can tune that pulse to only match the frequency of the head protons. The protons in your feet ignore it because the frequency is wrong. They are not in resonance. We have just isolated a slice of your body. Then we apply gradients in the other directions, left to right, front to back. We make the protons on the left spin faster than the ones on the right. When they all emit their signal, the computer receives a complex wave, a chord made of many notes. To untangle this chord, we use a piece of mathematics called the Fourier transform. It is an algorithm that takes a complex signal and breaks it down into its individual frequencies. It's like having a musical ear that can hear a chord played on a piano and instantly write down every individual note that made it up. Because we know that frequency equals location thanks to our gradients, the computer can take those frequencies and plot them on a grid. I hear a lot of signal at 64.1 MHz, which corresponds to the left kidney, so I will put a bright pixel there. I hear very little signal at 64.2 MHz, which corresponds to the spine, so I will put a dark pixel there. The banging noise you hear in the machine is the sound of these gradient coils slamming on and off thousands of times per second, vibrating against their mountings as they fight the force of the main magnet. They are rapidly changing the pitch of the room to locate every single hydrogen atom in your body in 3D space. It is a staggering feat of engineering. We are using a magnet strong enough to lift a car to align atomic nuclei. We are using radio waves to tickle them. We are using gradients to make them sing different notes depending on where they are sitting. And then we are using advanced mathematics to turn that song into a slice of visual reality. When you look at an MRI image, you are not looking at a photograph. You are looking at a computed map of the magnetic behavior of the water in your cells. You are looking at the decay rate of atomic spins. So what does this tell us? Why does it matter that we understand this? It matters because it changes how we view our relationship with technology and our own bodies. For most of human history, to see inside the body, you had to destroy it. You had to cut, break, or blast with radiation. We were limited by our physical eyes. The MRI represents a leap in human consciousness. It is a technology of listening. It requires us to be still. It requires us to understand the fundamental laws of the universe, electricity, magnetism, quantum mechanics, so deeply that we can manipulate them to reveal the truth of our own biology. There is a common misconception that technology separates us from nature, that machines are cold and artificial, but the MRI proves the opposite. It works only because we are part of nature. It works because the hydrogen atoms in our blood obey the same laws of physics as the hydrogen atoms in a distant star. We didn't invent the spin of the proton. We just figured out how to ask it a question. The next time you or someone you love has to slide into that narrow, noisy tube, try to look past the fear. Close your eyes. Listen to the banging of the gradients. And remember that you are not just lying in a machine. You are participating in a conversation between the magnetic fields of the Earth and the water of your own life. You are dancing at the atomic level, and for the first time in history, we can see the dance. That is the hidden reality of the MRI. It is not magic. It is the music of the spheres, played out in the tissues of the human body.
You've been listening to First Principles. Until next time, stay curious.